Hello, and welcome back to Living the Questions podcast. I am so excited to introduce the final guest of the first season of this podcast. And this feels really, hmm, yeah, serendipitous, kismet, cosmically aligned, all of those fun things. This was the one guest episode I did not have recorded prior to the season coming out, and it unfolded as kismet things do. And it just was such a natural, such a natural alignment. So, this podcast guest today is my absolutely wonderful and amazing and so lovely somatic coach, Holly Lowery-Davis. Oh, she is amazing. I'm so excited for you all to meet her. The really sweet cosmic alignment, as I'm calling it, of it all is that I met her in the fall. We started working together, and my podcast started in the spring. And as we were working together, I was connecting with her, or I was updating her about the fact that I started this podcast. And also at that time, we were talking about just different things about how the work that we've done together had progressed. And due to that, she actually had asked if I would be open to giving a testimonial, and beyond that, if instead of just a regular testimonial, if I'd be open to doing a swap of our podcasts, which was a hell yes for me. I was so excited by that. And it made so much sense to me. The conversations in this podcast so naturally, which makes total sense due to just what I'm learning in life and living out, and experiencing. A lot of the conversations have brought up somatics, have brought up the somatic, coaching and therapy I've been doing in life as of late, and how that speaks to me and how I think about life now and how I think about myself and take good care of my whole self, my body, my nervous system, how I relate to my mind now and not just separate it out. And all of that is foundational work that her and I have been working on together since late August, September of last year. So I feel so excited to get to actually share the person that I've been deep diving in this work with. She's she's such a beautiful heart and a wealth of information, and I love the way that she sees the world. I'm so grateful to have her on here, not only to talk about somatic wisdom of our bodies and our whole selves, but also to talk about the questions she's living into personally that for sure connect with the theme of the work that she does in this world. But as we start every episode, it's not about what our title is in the work that we do. It is what brings us alive, who we are as a whole being. And that to me is a really sweet thing to get to see her bring her questions in, and the way that the work that she does naturally comes in and weaves in and yeah, is a part of her living her way into the answer over and over again, however that may be. It's really special to get to have her on just to explore and dive into her personal question, and also to deepen, and like connect probably many through lines of this podcast over the course of this season that talk about somatics. So if you ever were curious about what I was jamming on or talking about ever when I brought that up, this may be the episode for you to, dive in, learn more, it hopefully gives more context to, to those pieces. And and perhaps ignites some more questions and curiosities within you to dive in deeper for yourself of what your relationship to your own soma is, your own body, your own nervous system, all of the beautiful things. And so I'm so excited to have Holly on this episode and to get to share just beautiful conversation with her. As always, if you have met Holly before, I hope this only deepens the beautiful experience that you've had with her. And if you have never met her before, I am so excited for you to get to meet her today and dive deeply into this conversation with us. It is just such a sweet and special one, and she is such a sweet and special human to me in this world and in my life. And I'm very excited to get to share her energy, this conversation, the beauty of her heart and wisdom that she brings forward in everything that she does. And for sure in this podcast that we get to jam on together. So without further ado, enjoy the conversation with Holly. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Living the Questions. Today, I have the absolute honor of having Holly Lowery-Davis here with me, who is just such a dear soul to my heart and happens to be my somatic coach, which is just an even greater honor on top of an honor. I actually usually start these episodes not talking about credentials, so I'll quick pivot switch and ask you my question, which is, instead of announcing your credentials to start, can you tell us what brings you most alive and what invites you to be most you?
Ooh. You're asking this like this is a small question. I love it. Just going right to the heart of things right up here. Okay, what makes me most alive and like make me feel like most me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can I take a second to like feel into that? Great. Awesome. It's funny what's coming up is like, Holly, what you just did is what makes me feel most alive. Is like asking, not even asking for permission, though I did in this case, but like really the muscles around learning to pause and feel for something beyond like the reflex of, like I'm good or I'm fine or this is the answer I'm supposed to have, or right, like all the ways in which we've been conditioned to just kind of like move in autopilot, and really learning how to slow down and feel for something maybe a little bit more true, maybe a little bit more on the body, and yeah, so that makes me feel most present, most alive. Is really pausing, and at first I'm like, oh, like nature makes me feel most alive, or my kids, or right. But the reality is, yes, those things are true. And I don't actually get to experience them unless I first pause and slow down. So, yeah.
I love that. And I love the modeling of what you just did there too, especially too, like even at the beginning, I like noticed my excitement. I'm like, you're here and this is who you are. And here we go. And we're off to the races. And even just that invitation, again, the somatic invitation, I know you've taught me well, is we can ask for that. We can, invite that of ourselves to just say, I'm going to take a beat because I don't know. Otherwise, it will just be the first thing that comes to mind rather than actually like checking in and knowing, actually asking myself really what my answer is and allowing myself even to be surprised maybe by that and not need to immediately knee-jerk urgently know something or make it up in real time and then have it slowly come to you. I love the sweetness too of what it not only invites you, but what I felt like it invited me by you asking for yourself too. So thank you for that beautiful.
Yeah, I wish I could say I planned that modeling moment, but here we are. Just do it.
Well, and sorry, go girl.
No, I was just gonna essentially affirm what you just said around like that, like the learning, or like, yeah, sort of just building the practice, building the muscles of, yeah, oh, like, it is okay for me to pause. It is okay for me to take a beat. And I know that actually that language, hearing you say it, I'm like, oh, that's something you use, those words. And I think, I've gotten the privilege of seeing you like really start to feel into what is it like to actually allow myself that, not just conceptually, no, like, oh, that's allowed, but like actually, um, live that permission. And so, yeah, I think it's practice, but it's also like gets to be moment, day to day. And it's been cool to be part of your process and witnessing that for you. So, yeah.
Thank you for that mirror back and for being, yeah, such a beautiful and safe space for that to come forward and be seen. And also in this moment for what you just said, that I feel so seen by that. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
It's a really beautiful thing, especially when we're getting to lean more into the like wholeness of who we are, and yeah, those pieces that could otherwise be really vulnerable. It's a really sweet thing to feel seen, that there's such a different feeling of being known and seen in that specifically. And so that's really special. Thank you for that gift.
You're very welcome.
And my next question is what brings us here today, which is, what is the question you are currently living into?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, when I first started thinking about this, whatever it was, like a month ago, that question felt, which I'll share in a moment, felt like so alive. And I would say, even looking back, I think there was a part of me even like almost grasping for answers at the time. And then revisiting it, even just in the last couple of days, and thinking about preparing for this conversation and where am I at now with this question. And I'm like, I still don't have answers, but I'm definitely doing the work to live it. Oh, that being said, my question that I've been trying to live into is, what does it look like? And forgive me, because this isn't like the most well articulated question, because it's a messy one, but essentially, right, in my work, I'm often thinking about, learning about, working with what we might call the psyche, but like through an embodied framework, right? So through a more somatic, body-centric lens, and learning and sort of holding space for how does the mind and the body really work together. Also want to say, like, they're not separate. In our culture, we often think of them as separate. And we could understand that, that we have more of a sort of conceptual, intellectual part of us, and also more of like maybe a right brain, creative, embodied, felt sense aspect to our experience, right? And so oftentimes we think of those as like mind, body. And so in my work, I hold a lot of space for really getting to know someone's experience, and like processing, and maybe even we could call like digesting experience, specifically painful experience, traumatic experience, through that framework of really understanding how are the mind and the body working to help us survive, and how do we start to work with our like inherent survival function, rather than like trying to power over them or get rid of them, right? And in that work, as I've done the work myself, like with my own practitioner and my own time and my own practices, right, where I've come to more recently is this place where I feel more called to and connected to something bigger than psyche, something bigger than myself, right? We could call that God or spirit or universe or higher power or whatever, right? It doesn't really matter. But we all, I think most people on the planet have some sense of connecting to something bigger than themselves, even if it's just nature, right? I shouldn't say just nature, like nature is God. But, right, so this is a very long-winded way of explaining my question.
Every minute.
But really getting to a point where, there's, I think, part of me or maybe the whole of me that feels like, well, that's truth, like aligning to something bigger than myself, rather than like the many ego identities or wounded parts of myself, or even my coping strategies, like really getting space enough from all of that to realize like, oh, I just am, like I just exist and I'm good inherently. And like, if I'm able to keep that sort of distance between wounds and my patterns and my stories, and even the identity of like, I'm a mom, or I'm Holly, or I'm a practitioner, right? Like starting to kind of set some of that down and really feel into, I just am, right? And that feels sometimes a little at odds with the work that I do with folks to really start to build a strong sense of self and a strong sense of like, or maybe a better way to say it is like rewriting narratives around our pain and rewriting patterns around how we do life and how we cope with our trauma and how we cope with day-to-day stressors and who it is we believe we are. And so, yeah, like I think my question lies in like, how do those two things kind of fit together? This land of trauma resolution work where it's, I think, really important to start to, like, right, even if we use parts perspective, which we could talk more about. I don't want to get super into right out the gate unless that's where you want to go. But like we turn towards a wounded part of ourselves and start to meet it with compassion and love, and even just see it like, oh, I didn't know she was in there. Oh, so tender. Oh, what's her story? What's going on for her, right? Like I really believe, and this is like the foundation of my work, that process is honestly critical in order to resolve past wounding, past traumas, past patterns that are no longer serving us, etc. And sometimes that feels a little at odds with just completely disidentifying from the story and from that pain. And so, yeah, I'll pause there because I have more to say, but that's the question.
It is so juicy and massive, which I love so much. And I love that how we started this was with you taking a pause. What was coming to me as you were talking before was taking up space, was allowing yourself to take up space. And pause before was a modeling of that in a way of allowing for there to be room, for there to be space. I'm such a lover of space, so immediately I'm very excited about this. But even, partway into your question, you were like, I know this isn't a small way to say this. And I was like, yes, take up all of it. Like this question needs room to be and stretch out and to be discovered. And so I felt you really doing that. This felt like another version of you giving yourself room, taking that pause and being with all of what this is and still not all of it,
Right.
And I think that's really beautiful. So I just wanted to name that off the bat. And this question is amazing. I feel like there's so much nuance here that I'm hearing you dive into of both being necessary and how. When does one become limiting to another? When does it not allow us to actually experience another? How do they connect? How are they, what is their relationship? And what does looking into what their relationship is look like in living that question? So to that, what has that looked like for you in your life?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things that are coming up I think are important to name. And I'll name that like I'm using like maybe language like parts perspective, or I'm about to talk about Jungian theory, right? Like, so I want to name that like I am a jack of all trades in many ways. Like I study many different sort of schools of thought and like how to work with what we're talking about here. But I'm an expert in none of them. So I just want to preface that out of the gate. But I actually think that helps me orient to this question maybe a little more easily because I can like kind of look across different, not even just like theories, but also like wisdom traditions. And when I think about the like need to really do some of that more trauma resolution work before we can come to a place where we really actually feel connected to something spiritual, rather than just like bypassing our experience, which is really common in a lot of spiritual spaces, right? Carl Jung often talks about this idea that like we actually need a really solid container for the process of alchemy to happen. If we think about inner transformation, growth, he would call it the process of individuation, healing trauma, right? We can think about that as alchemy. We're taking one thing and turning it into another, transmuting it into another. So we think about like transforming our pain into presence, right? Our pain into pleasure, our grief into joy, right? In order for that process to happen in a real way, not just in a like, I'm going to fake it till I make it kind of way, or I'm going to pretend my pain doesn't exist kind of way, right? And in order for that to happen in a real way, in a sustained way, we actually have to have a vessel to hold the alchemy in the first place, right? We can think of the body as a vessel or a container for that work to happen inside of. And if we don't have a strong body and a strong sense of self, or even like we might call it a strong ego, we're going to like implode, right? And oftentimes like folks do, like this is where we can really get into tricky territory of having like a psychotic episode and things like that when we're trying so hard to like make something happen, to do something to our pain, to quote unquote fix ourselves, but the infrastructure to hold the tension of that change inside of ourselves isn't yet developed, right? And so when I think about getting to a place where we actually do feel connected to something higher, we're not going through the motions, we're not just bypassing our pain and trying to hand it over to God, right? Like we're really actually tethered in a way to whatever God is to you, right? I think that we first have to like build a strong enough vessel or like container inside ourselves to be able to hold whatever life throws our way, right? Not just the pain, but also begin to hold pleasure. Sometimes that's even really hard. Even we would all argue like we want more joy, we want more pleasure, we want more goodness in our lives. But when we have a history of like getting really, like we're just really familiar with holding not those things, with holding pain, with holding trauma. We don't like the nervous system actually starts to become more comfortable in the land of pain. And so pleasure feels unfamiliar because it's unknown. And in that way, it feels scary. So even around that, we have to start to build the capacity to hold those things. And so when I think about, yeah, where am I with this question? Part of me is like, okay, I think it is necessary to kind of build a strong self and a connection to self with a capital S, right? Young would call it the self, or perhaps even the ego. Through a parts perspective, we might call it the self. If we have this, really when I talk about self, what I mean is this like center of you that is not judgmental, that is compassionate, that is curious, that is open, that is patient, that is present. And it doesn't like this self doesn't have the answers, but it also doesn't need them. It's kind of like okay in the unknown, right? And so I think we actually have to develop that before we can then hold or like reach for something beyond the self.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this idea of creating that container, like making it actually possible and within the realms of reach to get to where we are even before where we want to go. I think that piece, I've been living into that question a lot in many different areas of what does it look like to actually learn what congruence is, to really allow ourselves to just be where we are, and how often we can bypass that without even realizing that that's what we're doing. We know where we want to be or where we expect ourselves to be. That judgmental part that you're saying would not be in the capital S self. And that judgment can override us even recognizing that we're not even seeing where we actually are in the moment.
Yeah.
Which we need to be able to see in order to move anywhere further than that point. And I feel like I'm hearing you speak from that place with this question of, can we actually be present in where we are first to then be able to have these steps towards a very large question that's outside of us? Can we start inside to be able to move externally? Yeah. Do you find that the external questions, because even as I said that, I'm like, oh yeah, I find myself thinking externally sometimes before I think internally. And is there something there with this question that you hold where we've gone external too soon, and there's part of this where internal is needed to come back to in order to actually connect externally in a way that's grounded? And
yeah, when you say connect externally, you mean like something higher than ourselves or spirit, God, universe, etc.?
In this question, yes. In general, okay. It could be, obviously it could be many things, but in this question, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because now I am thinking about it in multiple ways. So, okay, I have so many thoughts for this question. I think I catch myself doing this too, and this is coming up a little bit for me a couple of minutes ago, and I kind of lost track of this thought, so I'm glad it's coming back around. In that, like, sometimes I and most people who find themselves on sort of a spiritual path will find themselves here too, which is like the ego becomes identified with being spiritual. Mm-hmm. And you're like, how can I do this the right way? How can I connect to spirit in the right way? Or how can I be the most spiritual person? Or right, like, obviously I'm not sitting around asking myself that question explicitly, but like there's a part of me that like wants that, because there's a part of me that wants to do most things perfectly or well and right, or right. And that's not all bad, but I think our work there is to see it as a part of ourselves. Or one of the teachers I have the privilege of like learning from, or having learned from, his name is Red Hawk, and he would call it like the small eyes inside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we have like many small eyes, or many small, quote, pieces of self. Right. And so to see the identification of I'm now conscious, I'm a spiritual person, right? It's like, well, that's just another part of me, like, trying to feel safe. Mm. And so, and like trying to feel safe in my case through the pursuit of like perfection or getting it right or doing a good job. Mm. And so I catch myself sometimes like reaching for the external, and then feeling like, and when I say reaching for the external, I mean like trying really hard to feel connected to something bigger, and then feeling like I'm not doing it right. Or if I could only just like ground a little bit more, I'd be more present, I'd be more connected, right? And so again, you can hear that like inner judgment creeping in. And this is human, right? So this isn't like another thing to make wrong about ourselves, but it is, I think, where the work lies in that, if we can't like pause and again get distance and start to see and like witness that this is all kind of like another manifestation of the ego trying to like feel strong and secure inside of itself, only then can we like actually take a breath and maybe get distance enough to feel connected to something higher. Because the reality is like spirit is always available. Connection to something bigger than ourselves is always available. But to truly feel that, we do have to be present and like really present with our embodied experience and the reality or environment, and to give the present moment our full attention. And in that, I think, is where we actually feel most connected to something spiritual. It's not in the like dogmatic practices or prayer or somatic practices, or right. It is actually just presence. But it can feel really hard sometimes to remember that it's like that simple. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, but
this, again, living the questions, it makes things actually not easier. I keep distinguishing simple and easy. Like it might be simple in practice and in word, and also, or not in practice, in word, it's simple. In practice, it's not necessarily easy. And so I think that's a lot of what, I mean, especially when we're talking about something so grand as, spirituality, which I think I love hearing you untangle in a lot of ways too, because, anyone's relationship to spirit or something that feels kind of just, you can't really ground it into any one thing. And it could have lots of different wounding tethers to it in and of itself due to dogmatic practices and, and just different things that we've, as humans, decided to box it into. And so I think there's a lot of that where it's not necessarily easy to be with. And then how do we untangle some of those pieces to be able to be with the true core of it all? And what does that mean to each of us? And I think there's something really powerful there, which can be hard to connect to. So I really love the language that you bring to this to invite some inquiry into whatever that connection might be for anyone. Anyone listening, which is really big. And as I was hearing you talk to, I was like, oh, you know what's interesting about this? We could swap out God, nature, universe, any of those things for even answer, which I was just thinking of in this context of what we're talking about here, the way you were describing getting to understand spirituality in that way. I was like, that's exactly how I've been sitting with questions in these episodes. It's, we don't need to necessarily know, like have to drive to get to that one quote unquote answer. We get to just be in this, and it requires presence to actually be here and to understand whatever this may be, and this meaning answer. And that it's not an arrival point necessarily. It's an ever unfolding. And I feel like hearing you talk about your question feels like that to me. Like we could switch out a spiritual entity for answer, and it reads the same, which is fascinating.
That is a really fascinating and excellent observation that I wouldn't have picked up on, but you're so right. It's like, the cliche of like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Like it's a cliche and it's an annoying one, but it is real in that. And I think I would maybe guess, like you've experienced some of this even in our work, is like, we often want an answer. It's part of our, like, I don't want to call it human wiring. It's like our mammalian wiring is answers feel safe. Right? Like answers feel known, and to a mammalian body security system, like that's a survival need, right? And if we can sort of learn how to build capacity to beyond our like mammalian instincts and into more of like what I might call like a higher center, or like more like human functioning beyond just animal functioning, right? It's like that's the part of us, right? We could call it part of the brain, but it's also like the capital S self that actually just knows, well, I can hold the tension of not having an answer. And right now so I look around my environment, I'm safe enough and comfortable enough to feel secure and stable inside of the unknown, right? specifically thinking about these questions. There are absolutely many reasons or, circumstances we might find ourselves in that don't feel safe or comfortable enough to hold that tension. And that's where we get to ask, like, cool, what do I need to feel safer? What might help me feel more supported inside of this like really unstable feeling experience I'm having? And there's like so much beautiful, juicy work that gets to be done there too, right? So this isn't like a hierarchy. I think they're just different experiences and both need our attention at different moments in our life. And when circumstances are safe enough, stable enough, comfortable enough for us to pause and realize, yeah, okay, there's enough safety here. What else is available beyond just like the immediacy of my mammalian instincts? Yeah.
Yeah, I really, really love that. I think that, I mean, and to me too, what you were just describing is feeling into a little bit of what you were touching on before, which is the connection piece of coming or of having connection with self as a way toward having a connection with something greater than ourselves, and that it's so base level that like the need is so base level to start to then get to a higher space. And that feels, I feel like I'm talking a hierarchical way, and it's not meant to be that way. It's just more like stepping stones that we actually need in order to have solid foundation to be with, and like truly be with, not just want to be with, but actually, there's something there that I feel like I'm curious about. I feel like I'm hearing you talk about.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm like listening, and I feel like we keep circling back to like a point in the conversation. I'm like, there's something potent here, and I don't yet have the words for it. And so maybe I'll just ask for spirit or source to give them to me. But I'll just start and hopefully it will come. So my work in that, like, right, building the capacity to have a strong enough self to hold the reality of my mammalian experience and like my feeling experience, right? Thinking about even just holding something like sadness or deep grief or loss or, right, like all of these really hard emotions, right? My work right now, and has been for a long time, though it's evolved for sure, is like not like I catch myself in the tendency to see my sadness as something wrong, something to be fixed, a problem to be solved, the sign that I'm not where I'm supposed to be, or right. And the reality is like sadness is just sadness. Mm-hmm. We as a culture have assigned it a label that is negative, right? But I'll never forget my now practitioner, who wasn't my practitioner at the time. I interviewed her for my old podcast like 8 years ago. Her name's Barbara Aroshina. And she talked about feelings as if, right, like all of our feeling experience, the range of our human emotions could be captured on a piano. And every single emotion has its own key. There are the low keys, there are the high keys, but you need all the keys in order to like play a beautiful range of music, right? And that was the first time it really started to click for me, like, oh yeah, my sadness or my anger or whatever, that it, feels hard to hold. There's no doubt. It's hard to hold that. It's hard to allow myself to be in it and to feel stable inside of it. But it's like actually not a problem. And so my work lately has been around that and like catching the parts of me that are like, oh, this is a problem, fix it, resolve this, get back to joy, get back to pleasure, get back to goodness, right? And again, mammalian instincts, we don't want to feel pain. Pain feels like death to the mammalian body. And so we can understand like, oh, that's my biology at work. And the more I push away my pain, the more I resist my sadness or my grief, like it's still there. It's just now kind of like held up in the body or like kind of, under the covers. It's going to be there whether we look at it or not. And so if we can start to look at it without the extra resistance or the layer of judgment that's like, ooh, this is something I have to fix. This is something that's wrong with me, or something I have to resolve or release, right? It's like, oh, could I just like let myself feel it? Mm-hmm. And if I can't, what do I need? Do I need another body to hold the space with me? Usually in my case, that's the truth. Like I need my husband to literally hold me, or I need my practitioner to be on a call with me, or I need my friend, and I need to like really, and I say friend, I consider myself very lucky to like at this point have cultivated a few excellent friends who really know how to just listen without trying to fix, right? And so, yeah, I think the learning how to hold all of those types of emotions and truly just feel them and allow them to kind of move through. And it feels like a wave, right? Like it feels sadness moving through, just feels like a wave of energy, because that's what emotion is. It's energy and motion in the body. And so it's funny, like this is what I support clients to do, but my work still lies here myself, because it can be really hard to do on our own when we've spent a lifetime avoiding our emotions, or being told they're too much, or actually not having safety enough to feel them in the presence of others, right? And so circling back to the piece around developing strong self in order to connect to something higher, sometimes I'm like, the story I tell myself is like, well, I'm not feeling spiritual, or I'm not feeling connected to something higher because I'm feeling sad or because I'm feeling angry. It's like, no, actually, like feeling my sadness, feeling my anger, feeling my grief is connection to God. It is connection to something higher. It doesn't feel like joyful in the moment or blissful all the time, but that presence with whatever is there is something higher. And so, but it takes a lot of work sometimes to like remember that when again, speaking for myself, when I'm like in the heat of those really big waves.
Yeah. Damn. That's so big.
It came. The words came.
So powerful. That's so powerful, because you are so right. In the way we have just set up the conversation around these things, the inherent negativity around certain things where I know in my lived story, I resisted even, associating myself with anger or with, anything that felt like it was deemed negative. That's not what I want to be. I'm going to lean over here. And that's compartmentalizing parts of self. And also the deeper thing that you just brought up that just feels so huge to me is like, that's cutting off connection to something so much, something so much more beyond myself. And that's then cutting off connection to something powerful to me, to beyond me, and so it's because, the interconnection of like us being our whole self, of us having connection then in that, as we step into that, we never know sometimes we get a glimpse of, but we never know the ripple effect that has around us, and beyond us. So that's so amazing to me. And I was thinking about this too. I was just having a conversation this past weekend with someone who was talking about not wanting to get emotional, like good emotional, but like emotional. And the words that they said really moved me, which was that they were concerned it would never end, that they had held it in so much for so long that if it came up, they were just terrified that it would just never stop, that knew how long it had been held back. And it was really moving to me in that moment to know from my own experience, God, I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to feel like this is never going to end. To be so unskilled in feeling an emotion, in being with one that, of course, you don't know what an ending will feel like, or that they'll feel like waves, and that's a really beautiful thing. But to be with someone and see that and just know, and just to, want to just be like, trust, it's really, it won't be always. But it was really powerful to see someone in that moment of like, just about to like let themselves leap, just about to experience the beauty of what that could offer. And the humanness of just saying out loud, I'm afraid it will never stop. It just goes to show the enormity, and it shows the newness that so many of us have with even just relating to emotions, and what powerful doorway that can be to what you were saying, which is like, what connection does that give us far beyond ourselves that we're not even allowing right now, or open to, or don't even know exists?
Yeah. I think you just named a bunch of things that are really important without even knowing it. It's just fun. First, I really want to, like, I guess, honor, especially if your friend or whoever this person was is listening, like, to have that self-awareness of, I'm afraid that this feeling will never end, or that, like, I'll be drowned by it, right? Like, that in and of itself is such rich, beautiful clarity. And, like, the thing I want to offer for folks listening who maybe also feel that or have felt that at certain times, excuse me, still getting over my little chest cold, is that, like, I think sometimes in the trauma resolution space or the therapy space, right, the healing space, there is a desire to get right to the heart of things right away. And that's not bad. Arguably, like, that's what we want to do, is really get down to the root of what's, the essence of our experience, and to be with that. But when I talk about building the capacity to be with all of our feelings, I think about it in layers, right? And so even for your friend who's like, I'm afraid if I feel the thing at the core of it, it's going to be too much. Well, then if we come out one layer, we've got the fear. And maybe there's, like, more layers stacked on top of that. Some sort of resistance, or even, like, protective strategies of, I'm just going to distract myself so I don't feel the fear even, right? We've all got that. That's part of this, again, this, like, mammalian security system. And so what I often, suggest, or again, like, practicing myself every day, is like, well, if it's too much to feel the thing at the root, I get to start with the fear, or I get to start with my no. Right? The fact that I have a no for, like, oh, this wave is going to be too intense, it's going to knock me out. Nope, I'm not going there. Great. Can we just hang out at no and stay present with the no, right? Like, really stay present with, well, what's a no feel like inside my body? Can I celebrate that I'm even aware that I have a no? Because that in and of itself is a huge skill, right? And a gift to give ourselves permission to actually just honor the truth of our experience. Like, I have a no for that, and I don't have to force past it in the name of, quote, healing or whatever, right? And sometimes that could be really hard for folks, because they're like, I want to do the work, I want to heal. But in my experience, it does us no good to rush to any deep feeling experience when we have a no, or even, like, an I don't know coming up inside, right? And so we just start with a no. And then if the no, shows us, oh, like, there's actually just some deep fear there. Cool. What's the fear like? Could we even get to the edge of it? Could we feel the sensation of the edge of that fear in the body? And just do that for a couple minutes, see what happens. That could be all, right? And we start to do what's called titrating. So we feel a little small doable piece of whatever that is. We'll call it the fear. And then we come back to stability. We come back to distraction. We come back to soothing. We come back to whatever coping is going to help us feel safe again. And then when we're ready, we go back to the edge of the fear. Right. And so we do it in small doable ways. So for your friend, or again, anyone listening who identifies with that fear of getting sucked in or, like, taken over by the intensity of a big emotion, just know that, like, we have our whole lives to, like, do that work. There is no destination, right? It gets to happen in its own right timing.
Thank you for that gift of walking through that, and also the, like practical ways of entering into that. And also to, again, I feel like you're inviting spaciousness, to slow down and to be in this process. And also it was reminding me of what I've learned for sure in the work that we've done together, which is that the body speaks so many different languages that aren't just going to like I don't just understand them as words. And when emotions are coming up, we only know so much of what that is. That are getting to know the language of the body is a very long process and is a really cool one, and also is one that we may not just immediately understand. We may need time to interpret and to slow down, to give that space, to give that time, to really honor when we're open to it and when we're not, to not force it, to actually be where we are. All of these pieces that we've brought up in this conversation, I feel like are coming back here because they're all necessary pieces to us connecting to ourselves, to creating that foundation, to being open to this question you've brought forward, to this, to further bigger relationships beyond our relationship to self, and the sacredness of, the big sacredness of connection to self, and how that can in and of itself be something that's really profound and not limiting, not just stuck in a small box of me, but capital S self feels like a bit of what I feel like you're referring to when it comes to like it's like higher self piece of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm really glad you brought that up and brought this to the conversation, because I think especially, like, I think back to when I first began doing any form of like embodied healing work, right? So moving beyond just like conceptual processing about my childhood or my pain or broken relationship. I shouldn't say broken relationships, but like relationships that have ended, etc. Right? When I first began doing any form of even like focusing, right, which is where we drop down and into the body and learn how to listen to those like nonverbal channels, right? It was pretty profound and I would say spiritual to connect to some sort of wisdom inside myself that wasn't like my analytical, intellectualizing, thinking, figuring it out, doing brain, right? It was really like Eugene Gendlin, he would call it the felt sense, right? And for anyone who's curious about focusing or felt sense, or look into Eugene Gendlin's work. It's really quite profound, and it's depathologizing, and it's meant to be used by the community, not just therapy practitioner spaces. And so, excuse me again, when I think about this. The first time me like actually experiencing, oh, there is a wisdom inside me I didn't even know existed, right? Not just this like logical part, but like something deeper that I couldn't even really explain. There was images and sensations and just this inner knowing that came from a place that felt like the center place inside me, right? That experience, especially for the first time, felt spiritual. It felt like numinous in a way, right? Because in ways it is that channel that then connects us to something higher. And so again, I think being able to develop those skills of really tuning in to something beyond our narrative and our story and our well-worn strategies, and like all of those are there for good reason. And we start to listen a little bit more deeply to, I'm going to call it the body, but really just like the whole of us, like beyond the story. I do think that that's inherently holy or sacred or spiritual in a way, because there's a connection to something much deeper.
Yeah. There's something really cool to me about the connection of where this question began and what I feel like you just said here, or like where we've gotten to, not an arrival point of an answer. And also it feels like there's some connection here that feels much deeper than I personally knew when you first mentioned this question. And I'm curious, with all of these pieces, what does this bring up for you in your own work with this question as you've been living into it? Does this feel like does this feel like a piece of, actually, I'm not even going to give you options. Please tell me.
Yeah.
What comes up for you as we're with this piece of connection?
Yeah. I mean, lately, I would say how it's been kind of, or the ways in which I've noticed it showing up. I'm sure there's so many ways in which like aren't even in my awareness yet, but it's kind of like making peace with the fact that like I am a spiritual being. And because I think for a long time I felt kind of not maybe shame around it, but just like a resistance because I know how much spiritual bypassing takes place. I know how much harm can and has come from like religious communities. I think there's a lot of like woo-woo white lady wellnessy stuff around this conversation. And so I think I like distanced myself for quite a long time, both externally, but that also had an impact in terms of my own like day-to-day experience with connecting to some sort of, right, again, something higher or even just like that higher self. And so lately I've been coming back to like, well, what does it look like truly in practice for me? And I think I'm reaching this like, it sort of feels like a threshold in a way where I've done enough, not all, but enough work to feel like pretty strong in my sense of self and being able to be a witness to my feelings, to my younger parts, to my wounds without always feeling like taken over by them, or right, there's space there for me to be the witness to that and to do when we're in the seat of witness, we can really work with that. Right. And so like that's kind of there and is always ongoing because there's always like something to be worked with inside of ourselves. And sometimes that thing feels like a lot. And sometimes it feels like I don't have my practitioner to call on that day or my partner to like endlessly hug me until I've cried all my cries. Right. And so turning at that point to something higher than myself for support and as a resource, really, not to say, take all this pain away, I don't want it, but to say, help me hold it. Mm-hmm. And so really even look like, what does that look like to have a secular prayer practice, right? A prayer practice that isn't rooted in a religion, but me connecting and like really speaking with something bigger than myself and asking for support to help me hold the intensity or the weight of whatever the thing I'm holding is, right? And so whether we're wanting support to hold the wild times we're living in politically and globally, we're wanting support to hold a really young part of ourselves that's been triggered and like is all sorts of feelings, right? Like, could I literally like say, show me how to be with this part in a way that's like with love and kindness and show me what it looks like to be, to find stability inside of this feeling of chaos, right? Like literally just asking for that support. And so, right, 5 to 10 years ago, it was more like, I'm going to light a candle and write this down and like rip it up into shreds and like release this thing inside of me that I don't like. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not it. At least in my experience, I don't think that's really getting us to a place of deeper presence and connection. I think it's, again, like not wishing any one part of our experience to be different and just learning how to hold it and hold all of reality. Mm-hmm. With enough stability to be present to it. And so when I don't have enough stability because I'm human and I have a mammalian body, right? Like, can I ask and like be in connection to spirit to help me hold that?
And yeah, that's so beautiful. To like it's in some way it like feels like yeah, I don't know why the word partnership is coming up, but like allowing for that, yeah. There's like this divine partnership that's happening, allowing yourself to not feel alone in your own presence, even.
Yeah.
Which feels really beautiful and really powerful. Yeah. And again, I keep coming back to massive because it is. And I know like there are times where when I feel something massive, I tend to end up going to a place like the ocean because it is, you know,
Yeah.
it's so much larger than anything I could possibly be feeling. And there's something there about if I can be with something bigger than this, it will not overtake me. And there's something to what you were just saying about allowing that connection, that partnership to be that feels similarly of, something bigger than me. It's to hold the whole of me as well. And so that's just thank you for bringing those reflections forward and the beauty of that. And it's interesting too. I had a question I was going to weave in here if you were open to it about, especially with the beauty of what you do somatically in general, of what you think of sitting with the questions and living into the answers and how to hold ourselves in that space. And also, I feel like you just sort of spoke to that without even knowing the question.
Yeah, I feel like we've kind of been talking about that all along is like, right, building capacity to be with the unknown, which inherently feels threatening to our bodies. And when we don't have the capacity, looking for resources to bolster it, right? So, and whether that resource is connection to spirit or, which I think they're one and the same, but like turning to nature is such a powerful resource because nature actually models in so many ways how to be with reality, right? We look at a tree in any season, and that tree can model what it's like to be well inside of a storm, to be well inside of a drought, to be well inside of a blizzard, right? A really cold season. It doesn't mean that the tree's like always blooming, always, blossoming, but it's rooted. It's also like housing other life, inside of it and around it. It's nourishing, like, sort of soil nourishes it and it nourishes the soil ongoingly, even inside really difficult conditions. And so the ocean is another great example of, this huge, massive body of water. We could compare water to like our feeling experience and how to like hold life inside of that, right? And also like how to be fluid and how to sort of take up space and sort of carve out our own path, right? There's like so many beautiful metaphors. I won't tire us all of them here, but like, right, nature is another resource we can turn to when we feel like we don't have enough capacity inside ourselves. And like this, again, there's no destination with building that capacity. We're always gonna need support. We're not meant to like heal in isolation. We're not meant to hold the intensity of all our experiences by ourselves. We're just not. And so we, if we can't turn to another person, can we turn to a pet? Can we turn to an animal? Can we turn to nature? Can we turn to spirit? Can we turn to literally, can I touch the solid wall in front of me to feel what it's like? To feel something that's not changing, that's not moving, that is stable, that can hold my weight, that can hold my body as my body is holding its own intense experience, right?
Oof. Thank you for...
Yeah, sorry, that was
no
a lot.
No apologies needed. Truly, I overflow with gratitude. Not only it's not only what you are saying that I feel like is so helpful and tangible for me, for sure. I'll speak for myself, but I know beyond me, for people to be able to connect with themselves, to connect with the big things in life in a way that feels even just slightly more manageable, tangible, tolerable, and what a change that can make in a life. And so just thank you for even what you just said, because I feel so much that offers that. And also it's the way that it's the heart that you bring it, and the way that you bring it, the energy that you bring is just really, to me, very soothing and really honoring of all that we're holding, and really gentle in diving into really big things and being with things that are unknown, and being with the enormity of massive questions, and being in the middle of what can otherwise sometimes feel really unsafe and rocky, and allowing ourselves to know how to actually be okay in that, how to navigate that in a way that feels rooted. And so just thank you for being who you are and what you do and what you bring, and having these questions that only deepen, I feel like, the beautiful truths you bring forward, and the gifts that you bring to this world. I just thank you so much for
Yeah, thank you.
For being here in this conversation today.
Yeah. No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for like giving me space to talk about all the really like deep and nerdy things that I don't often get to nerd out about in other spaces. It's been so lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here for all the nerdiness. I love diving into that. So thank you for letting me be in that with you. And also a couple things. One, where can people find your work and you if they would like to continue to connect with you?
Yeah. A couple different places. I have a podcast also. It's called Can I Be With That? It's on all the major podcast forums. It's also on Substack. That's kind of its home and where it gets like shared from. And my website is, I'll give you the easier one, which is my name. It's hollylowry.com. And there is a plethora of resources on there in terms of like kind of places to dip your toes into, lots of the things we were talking about here today, and really building that capacity to feel our feelings. And that's also where there's some info about working one-on-one with me, which is how I, right now, like the really the only way I'm working with clients is in one-on-one capacity. Because I truly, like, I don't know, I think there's something really profound about just being in that specific container where there's such individualized support and safety building happening. So that's where you can find more about that. And then Instagram, which I have a love-hate relationship with, but I am there. So yeah, you can find me on there at Lowery-Davis as well.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Holly. And I realize I might have pronounced your name incorrectly, so I will correct that when I do the intro.
I'm not identified with that. That's fine.
Well, that's important to me. The other question that I have to close this out is, did you get up to what you wanted to get up to in this conversation with these questions?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and then some. I was like, if I'm being fully transparent, I'm like, I don't know where I'm landing on these questions, but I trust I'll just talk to how they're sort of, again, being lived out and sort of experienced in real time. And so it was, really lovely to even just have a place to kind of reflect in real time on all of that. And so, I would say, and then some.
Thank you so much, Holly. Truly, just for your time, for your curiosities, for bringing your heart and exploration, and the vulnerability of what you just shared, right? The being in a space of not knowing and just letting it become, and exploring together and nerding out in all of the best ways. I just thank you so much for being here and for being in my life. It is a beyond greatest gift. So thank you for being you.
Thank you. I have so much gratitude. Just like, I don't have the words because my heart is just so full and like grateful. I feel really, really lucky to have you in my sphere of people I know, let alone you as a client. Like, it's just, I'm having like a really tender moment. Thank you.
Oh, what a gift. Well, the feeling is so mutual, and I'm going to save this part forever as a keepsake for me. Thank you. Really, your work invited that, and really, you bring that in. You magnetize it, and I appreciate getting to be more of myself, knowing you, and that's just the best thing that's ever been.
I'm gonna I don't know if you're gonna publish this piece. You can if you want, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm gonna clip this little end of the podcast, and anytime I'm having a rough day, I'm just gonna play it back to myself.
Ditto.
Yeah, right? Perfect.
Thank you so much, Holly. I hope to have you back many more times soon, as many times as you would like to come. And again, thank you for being here.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.